Welcome to the Journey of Gratitude podcast, hosted by Tri Robinson and Ruben Navarrete.
All right, so in the early chapters of your book, there's a lot of stories of flying, aviation, your plane. Take me back to how it is that you discovered aviation.
Well, my dad, better start this again, yeah.
No, go. Keep going.
But my dad, who I really admired, he was a torpedo bomber pilot in the South Pacific during World War II. Had crashed it, he had a full load of torpedoes. His plane blows up on his final coming into the aircraft carrier. As it hits the water, it blows him out. And he hits his, ejection, but his Mae West, which is his life jacket, only inflates halfway, and he's kind of like half dead, and he's in the water. His crew dies, and a destroyer picks him up. And why he loved flying so much
After that.
but he loved flying. Yeah. And he was soloed in a J3 Cub on skis in Fairbanks, Alaska, probably in the 30s and late 30s, and goes to the University of Alaska, but gets his pilot's license. The war breaks out, Pearl Harbor, and he comes home and goes to flight training, and he just loves flying, And as a kid, I remember he had a friend who had an old J3, and we had that old ranch up in the mountains, and they'd go up there and fly and land in a pasture there. And I had seen pictures of him. This is kind of maybe when I was barely born, I don't know. And there was just something about it. He just loved flying. And so I grew up hearing all these stories, flying stories, and the adventure of it. And for some reason, maybe because I was, his son, I just had this big longing for adventure. Yeah. But at the same time, I was really had a problem with school. I had dyslexia, which nobody understood, that the word wasn't even around then. They just thought I couldn't read, or I didn't apply myself hard enough. They just thought I wasn't smart.
Yeah, they didn't have a name for it back then.
No, and so I grew up with that, and there are certain things I just couldn't do. Math, it was hard. Foreign language was impossible for some reason. And so I'm in high school. Now I'm a good athlete.
Yeah.
I'm a runner, distance runner, and I'm team captain of the cross country team and everything. And so I was achieving some things, and it wasn't that school was horrible. I tried hard and I did okay, but I wasn't a great student. Yeah. I loved hunting and fishing and doing stuff with my dad. That was why I think I ended up loving the mountains and country so much. But anyway, it was actually his idea. He said, I was in high school, 16 years old. He says, you ought to get your pilot's license, maybe you might want to be a pilot someday. Because, in those days, flying was more of a athletic sport than it was like instruments and all that stuff. Right. Which I never had anticipated that, what modern day flying would be like. But flying by the seat of your pants was kind of like what I did. And so I ended up at 16. I went, I soloed, somehow passed. That was the hardest part, passing my written test, and just struggling, and but life was a struggle, it was, but I excelled at flying. I found that it became very natural to me, and
because in those days you could fly more by feel than you could necessarily. It was not so instrument heavy driven as you were saying.
Yeah. And especially a private license wasn't anyway. Later you tried to get instrument ratings and things. It became a different thing. Yeah. But Yeah.
Now, there's a story in the book, I think it was of your first solo flight, where you were talking to the radio and you asked permission to land the tower, or something like that. Tell that story. That's great.
So, okay.
Well, before you get to that story, is because I've always, like, my son, Evan, he's just soloed his first time. And I've listened to him practice, now with AI and with computers and flight simulators.
Yeah, I didn't have any of that.
No, you didn't have any of that. But they can actually practice talking to the towers and things like that.
Right.
And it's real language, and it sounds like a real person on the other side. And I'll sit in there and I'll listen to him and I'll think, my gosh, how in the world do you do that? How do you talk to the tower how do you do that? Because that just seems like so nerve-wracking. It's like a different language. It's a different scripting. It's a different
first
way of
of all,
talking.
in those days, there was very little talking to the tower. In fact, you could get away with flying all the way across country, which I did.
Yeah.
With no radio in the plane.
Right.
Because eventually, but at that time, to get my license, I did have to.
You just had to so tell that story about it.
So anyway, I my flight instructor, I don't remember. I had just turned 17-ish, or I was almost 17. And my flight instructor just took me out for regular, like, we're going to have a lesson today. And I thought everything was good. Long as he was there, I was good, Like, I knew I couldn't, I wasn't going to crash if he was there. And so we go out and I'm using the radio and I'm talking to the tower to get permission to get to the right runway. And I get to the right runway and they give me permission to land. I asked for permission to take off and they, and so we take off and we fly around and I shoot a landing. And it's a perfect landing, It's like a perfect. I come in and I go, yeah, that was great. And so as all of the sudden, my instructor says, pull the plane over. And this was Van Nuys Airport, which was in the San Fernando Valley in Southern California. A little different,
maybe a little more rural
then than it was now as Orange Groves.
But
you wouldn't
still, be soloing out of Van Nuys.
But still, there was still a lot of airplanes there, And so I go, wait a minute, you're getting out? I can't believe this guy's going to get out. I just hadn't anticipated that. It just like freaked me out.
Yeah.
He says, no, you're ready. He says, you got this. And he says, I'm going to stand right here and you're going to shoot 3 landings. I'm going to stand right here. And he had a radio, so he could talk to the handheld radio. Yeah. He could talk to the tower. So he tells the tower that I'm solo and and be prepared for me, right? Yeah. And so anyway, I call the tower, I get permission to take off, and I push the throttle of the firewall, and I break ground and I'm flying and I make this left turn, and I enter the flight pattern, come back downwind and so I'm crossing by the tower, which is on the other side of the runway where they can watch me. And I call in to ask permission to land, because that's what you do. So I say, I think the plane, I still remember it today, was like 3 Victor Papa, Cherokee 3 Victor Papa. I said, this is Cherokee 3 Victor Papa. I didn't. So I called in and that's what I'm supposed to say, is this is Cherokee 3 Victor Papa asking permission to land, And only I say, Van Nuys, I said, Cherokee 3 Victor Papa, this is Van Nuys Tower. Asking for permission to land. And so this is a different, you got to remember, this is a different time, but these guys were quiet for a minute. It was quiet. There's no response. And then all of a sudden, this guy comes on and he says, Van Nuys Tower, you have permission to land. And I realized, and I hear all this laughing in the background. All these guys are just hilariously laughing in the tower, and I go, and so all of a sudden here I'm
Would they say you have permission to land the tower?
Yeah, you got permission to land the tower. And so I'm just like, it just freaked me out because I realized my dyslexia had just kicked in. Everything was backwards, right?
Reversed everything.
And I reversed everything. And I got I am so embarrassed, humiliated, and I'm about to make my first landing, right? And I'm just undone.
Yeah.
So they just tell me to go downwind, and they get serious and tell me to go downwind, make a left turn, and come in for a final. And so I do. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I'm coming in on my final, and you're you're descending, right? You have to hit the end of the runway. Yeah. So you can't get too high, you can't get too low, and it's all controlled, not so much with your controls, but with your throttle, right?
And they probably didn't have the lights, the red on white, you're all right, or
no, nothing like that. No, it's just raw flying, right? And so I'm coming in and I get low. And in front of the runway is like just for safety's sake, there's probably a 200-300 yards of gravel. Mm-hmm. And I had never landed on anything but a solid surface, right? So it's nice and quiet, everything. And I'm coming in low, and I realize I pushed the throttle, but I'm not going to make it, right? I'm gonna land shy of the runway, and I'm just rattled because of this whole experience. Yeah. And the whole thing is just terrible. So I hit the gravel. And when the tires hit the gravel, it starts throwing the gravel up and hitting, the wings are metal, and it starts hitting, and I think all the rivets are coming out of the wing. And I think the wings are coming off, and it's just, I've never heard this kind of racket and noise, and I'm embarrassed.
You're crashing.
And I missed the runway on my first solo flight.
Oh, man.
And I come in, and my flight instructor's, he's standing there at the beginning of the runway, and he looks at me, and I come up and I pull up. And I'm going, I'm getting out, I'm done. I'm done. And he looked at me, and I could tell he's kind of laughing. He has a smirk on his face,
Yeah.
And he just takes his hand and waves me on, like, no, do it again. Mm-hmm. Do it again. And I go, I don't want to do it again.
Hell no.
I don't want to ever do it again. I'm done with this, and in my mind. And I'm just like, I almost killed myself. But for sure I made a fool of myself. And I know this guy's in the tower all laughing at me. And I mean, it was a devastating moment, right? For a 16-year-old, almost 17-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And so, but it was a moment. It was a transitional moment in my life.
Yeah.
That's why when I tell this story, it really impacts me to this day. Because I realize if I would have gotten out of that airplane that day, it would have changed the course of my life.
Yeah, because your life had so many crazy stories, crazy adventures, which we'll talk about. But you say in one, after that story in the book, you say, through the years, I've learned adventure always has a cost. There's usually an element of danger when you're pushed to do things you once believed impossible. And then a little bit later, on this day in 1966, I was about to experience an inner war I would engage in many times throughout my life. It's a battle between inner confidence and paralyzing feelings of incompetence and inadequacy, which I think really you've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
And that is admitting who you are and your humanness and your weaknesses, but still just like
pressing through.
But
it's a choice.
Yeah.
And I think in my life, that was the first time that I really had to make that kind of a choice.
Yeah.
I could have just given it up, but thank God that instructor wouldn't let me get out of the plane.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I shot 2 more landings after that perfectly. And it was really, it was the beginning of a major piece of my life.
Yeah.
Because then I became quite a proficient pilot.
Right.
Backcountry pilot after that, because it was all about feel.
Right. Right. And you wrote, I could either let my learning disability take charge of me forever or make a choice to succeed in spite of it. And you never struck me as somebody who, how do I say this? You never struck me as somebody who had like the big personality and had all of the answers and could do, and it was very like accomplished in what you could do. However, you just always had that humility to be able to move forward and press forward in, irregardless of anything around you. And I think that that's one of the things that I just like admire. But I have another question about that. How was your dad influential in your makeup and getting you through that time where you felt so inadequate? And how was that relationship? Because he was such a big, person in your life. Our dads are. You know, our dads are big people in our life.
Yeah.
And we view them not always in the right perspective. And many men idolize their fathers if they were fortunate enough to have a dad who, you know, is a good dad. So how was your relationship with him as a teenager, as it relates to this whole subject of your confidence, and how was he as a dad?
Yeah, he was a great dad. And I know a lot of people don't have that, you know. I feel very blessed that I had such a support. Both parents were so supportive of me. You know, later, you know, my mom went skydiving with me just because, you know, I was trying to sneak out to go skydiving without her, because I didn't think that she'd let me go.
Yeah.
And in those days, you know, and you had to have I was 16 at the time, and I had to have parent permission slip to do it, and I knew she wasn't going to sign it, so I was in this dilemma. Anyway, she decided to go with me, right?
Yeah.
So she was amazing too.
Yeah.
And but my dad was an achiever. You know, he was a PhD. He was the #1 educator in the United States at the time. He was principal of Beverly Hills High School. But he made every cross-country meet, every track meet.
Really,
yeah, I mean, he took me hunting and fishing and invested in me.
Was just
and I just always, but he was an adventurer.
Yeah.
I mean, the stories that he told me growing up
Right.
of the things that he had done, you know, were amazing things. And I guess I remember a time, this is kind of maybe a metaphor, but he'd take me hunting, right? And I was too young to take a gun.
Yeah.
But at the time, I probably was 10, 11 years old. And I remember walking behind him, trying to put my feet in his feet.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking, sorry, I'd love to be just like this guy. I wanted to be, you know. And he never really disappointed me.
Yeah.
And later, you know, he helped me buy this old 1944 airplane in Idaho. Think of that, 17 years old.
Yeah.
I have my own airplane in the state of Idaho at a time when it was all wilderness.
Yeah, we're going to get there, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But how did you make it? What was that transition? So you learned how to fly. You obviously got your pilot's license. Then you were 17 at that time? Okay. And then you must have been coming to the end of high school, right?
I was. I graduated from high school, my dad, there again, there was, because of my dyslexia and reading disability, I couldn't get entrance into most universities, mainly because I didn't have a foreign language. My German teacher in high school said, I'll give you a passing D if you promise never to take German again.
Please just get out of here.
And so there was only one college that they knew of, that this recruiter told us about, that didn't require foreign language. It was College of Idaho.
Yeah.
I didn't know Idaho, Ohio, Iowa. I mean, I had no clue where Idaho was. It was in Southern California. And he gives me, in those days, there's no GPS. Right. I had a 64 Volkswagen. He gives me a Texaco road map, right? And circles Caldwell, Idaho.
Yeah, we don't have GPS in those days, so he gives you a Texaco road map. Says, get out, go to Idaho.
I mean, this is crossing several state lines, right? Crossing the Nevada desert, actually crossing the California desert, first, and then.
So this was in the 60s.
This was in this 1967. Yeah. And I'm driving across Nevada for seems like 5 days, but it was it was a day. And then Oregon, Eastern Oregon is desert.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's desolate the whole way.
I'm lost. Still is. I actually got to Winnemucca, and I was there's two roads, right?
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure. The road maps weren't that great, and I wasn't sure which way to go.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there at this gas station looking at this road map, and there was a girl pulled up. She was a little older than I was, not maybe 2 years older or something like that. And she saw she looked at me and she said, "There's a kid that needs help." So she goes, "Can I help you? What are you looking for?" And I said, "I'm trying to get to Caldwell, Idaho." She goes, "Well, I'm going to Caldwell, Idaho.
Oh, wow.
I live there." And to this day, I think this girl's an angel.
Yeah, she probably was.
Because I'm in the wilderness, I mean, seriously, driving across Nevada in those days,
60s?
there was nothing.
Yeah.
There was just nothing, You drive hours, and these long straight roads. And she says, "Follow me," And so I follow her, up through Oregon and over Jordan Valley, Oregon, over the WWII Mountains. And I remember that night, it was just, sun was setting, and I was looking across what we know as the Treasure Valley, which was just agriculture. There was hardly any lights anywhere. You could see Boise way off. And I mean, it looked like the Garden of Eden to me,
I remember the first time I saw that was with you. We drove up here in the spring of 1988, or no, maybe 89. We came up that spring.
88. Yeah.
And I rode with you and Brooke and Nancy. I don't know where Kate was. She didn't.
She was with us.
Oh, she was with us.
We were all crammed in that little Honda car. Yeah.
Okay, and we crested that hill, and I had decided to move to Idaho. Sight unseen, and so you're like, "We're going to go up for spring break." And I remember coming over that valley, and at that time it was at night, and the valley below was just, I could just see a few little lights out there. But here's an interesting full circle moment for me. We stayed at the Logger Creek Inn. Remember that? On Park Center. It used to be, now it's like apartments, but it used to be a hotel. So that was our first night in Boise. And just this last week, Evan was playing in the Blue Thunder at the BSU. They invited him to play with them during halftime. And so he's a trumpet player. And we couldn't find parking. But they had parking there at the Logger Creek Inn for $20. And I said to Evan, this is the first night I spent in Idaho, was right here. There. And he was like, "Really?"
And like, here you are with
here we are,
full-grown
a life,
son.
35 years later, just living blessed beyond. We thought we were making a sacrifice at that time. Yeah. And it was
we all did.
Far from
we had no money when we
no
came
money,
up.
We didn't know what the
That's
future
a
held.
whole nother story of the book, but
it is.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to a subject in here, and it ties back to your dad and also ties back to your son, because you then had looked at your dad and his adventures, and like those of us who have the luxury of growing up with a father who has stories, always looked at that, and we always think, if I could be half the guy. And then recently I was looking at your son Brooks' posts on, I think, Facebook, and he was showing his craftiness in everything that he builds, from what he's done up at the cabin with all of those different, I mean, they're artwork.
Yeah, they are.
They're artwork.
They are.
And the stuff that he did with that wagon, and what he's doing now with the restoration of that old car you were telling me about. And he did stained glass. I mean, he did all this stuff. And I was like, wow, he's got, that so comes from you. I remember in the day back when we were planting the church, you would my dad was a perfectionist. And so that was always very hard for me to live up to. He just everything had to be perfect, had to be aligned perfect. But what I learned from you is it didn't have to be perfect, it just had to look good.
Yeah.
And you could pump out things that, weren't perfect.
Yeah.
But I remember when we made the pulpit, it wasn't perfect, but it looked really good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it had that. But the reason I bring that up is because, the influence that we have on our sons as dads is, we don't recognize the importance of that. So what would you say to young men now who are raising a family, who are maybe stuck in suburbia or stuck in, this social media life that we have, to get, what advice would you give them to maybe break out of that as dads, as leaders in their homes, having the model of your dad and you doing it yourself, helping your kids.
I think it's true. My daughter's very creative too. She's amazing, the stuff that she does and produces too. And so it's not just sons. I mean, as sons and daughters, we're important to daughters as equally or sometimes more so. But I think there's such a fine balance of wanting to sow in to them what you want and letting them be. become who they are. And so there's this balancing act as a parent that I think is very critical, as knowing when it's okay for them to be their own person and do life their own way, and give them the freedom and even the blessing to become who they are. Just as my dad, that's really the blessing I had, was he allowed me to become who I was, not who he wanted me to be. You know, I mean, he had expectations of me.
Yeah, because he had a doctorate, right? And you were dyslexia and could hardly get through school.
Yeah, which was amazing, though. I ended up, on the dean's list, graduating from the College of Idaho with a master's degree in education, which that was totally miraculous. That was a total act of God. But
well, they didn't make you take a foreign language.
Yeah, well, I never had to.
You never had to.
No, and I've been all over the world,
Right.
And I've been forced into all these different language groups all over the world, and I've been able to get by just by being me,
Yeah.
So it's okay.
Yeah, it is okay. And then what would you say to fathers who are raising kids in a very social media saturated environment where they're getting all the wrong messages?
Yeah, I know, that's tough. I mean, I don't really know what to say about that because I didn't do that in any way. We raised our kids with no electricity, no TV, we were up in the mountains.
That's the answer.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't even know. They didn't even know that. Well, it didn't exist, most of it.
Right.
But now I see my grandkids are dealing, and my kids are dealing with their kids in that regard. But I loved raising them in nature.
Yeah.
And I think it really formed them in many ways to who they became. Here they are. Bottom line, they've moved. They both have properties.
Yeah.
Connected to ours, and we're all raising cattle and grapes, and we're all doing this. But they all have their own lives. Everybody has their own vision for things, but at the same time, we're still a family. It's kind of a miracle to me.
Yeah, a miracle, but I think one that is maybe intentional but unintentional, in the meaning that many times when we're moving through life, especially as young parents, we don't have a lot of intention. However, it's hard to have a lot of intention when you are younger and you're raising kids and you are also trying to have a career. However, the fact that you did raise them without electricity, in that probably planted seeds very much in their childhood that germinated and flourished and brought them out here. So I do think one thing that's important for parents is to put things in their kids at very young ages so that they can germinate over time.
Sure.
I think that's one thing.
Yeah, you've got to, obviously as a parent, you have to direct, you have to discipline, you have to, there's certain things, you got to keep them on the right tracks and provide for them, whatever it is, go to college, whatever it is, provide. But sort of stay out of the way too.
Yeah.
And not get disappointed when they're not doing what you want.
Yeah, that's really interesting too that you bring that up, because I've noticed in people's that I've known who've had kids have gone wayward, maybe in their teenage years or in their 20s, they do come back. That passage in the Bible about guiding, raising up your kids in the ways they should go, and they will return to it. I've seen that time and time again, even when all hope seemed lost.
Right.
And so I do think of a lesson I think I take from these stories is expose your kids to certain things that you want them to, grow in early in life. I remember when Evan, my son, was 13, he said he wanted to fly. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll get you a discovery flight. And for his 13th birthday. And he just took to it. Now it's cost a lot of money to keep him, up in the air lessons, and I've had to really figure out how to make that happen. But by getting him started early on that, now that's a passion of his, and he's going full steam. But well, thanks for that. That's a great discussion. I wish we had a lot more time to go into those stories, and we will for sure. But thanks for going there and getting definitely.
I want to just say too that this whole thing, the journey of gratitude, I named the book pretty much after I wrote it. And I just realized, the emotion of just telling these stories and rethinking some of this stuff, it's a reaction to being so grateful.
Yeah.
That I did manage to overcome things.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for the people in my life that did so into me and provide opportunities for me. And especially for the woman I ended up marrying, who's been with me through it all and had this great adventure with me. And so sometimes I just get overcome by it when I talk about it.
Yeah. That's a blessing to have. All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
We'll see you on our next one.